Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Jordan, and it's funny to introduce myself because we have a few new people, which I'm very happy to see you. Very welcome here. I also, for the past couple months, it's been mostly people have done a lot of circling. It's like in my mind, I was preparing an advanced talk, and I'm going to see what I can do in like weaving it in to both types of audiences, but.
Hard to know who's here until we get going, probably, right? I mean,
Exactly. Yeah. And I hope that the whole thing it can be interactive and you guys can kind of jump in and all that stuff anyway. So those of you who are the first time, this next hour is more like a lecture, more traditional. And then the following 2 hours are going to be more practice, and that's going to be probably not very traditional, depending on what your traditions are. And the practice time, we often really like one of the things we're practicing and learning is basically a deeper kind of self-trust, like learning to really tune into your own intuition, your own sense of what's happening, to kind of trust your experience. And that kind of self-trust, that sense of what a self is, like begins to expand, I think, over time. Everyone's probably experienced this at some point in their life when you were like mostly concerned about your own well-being, and then somehow at one point like that just shifted, that expanded to include maybe all of your family or your crew or all human beings. The sense of like the self that you can trust gets bigger. That was a random detour. What I wanted to be talking about was that the purpose of this basically is to bring more discernment, more distinction, more capacity to make sense of what's happening. And there's perspectives that I've just played with a lot and found to be really useful in circling. I find myself going back to over and over again. So I'm hoping that I can offer something that will be meaningful to you so that you can basically find more meaningful relationships. We get to practice here tonight, but the whole point of the practice for me is that your relationships get deeper, more rich, more fulfilling everywhere with people that never will circle and probably never will care about it or hear about it. So I hope that this can go towards that. And what I want to talk about tonight is the dialectic, and particularly how we can, just a bunch of different ways of framing a dialectical movement. If you don't know what that is, that's fine, we're about to go into it. But particularly how you can understand kind of developmental trajectories of things that seem to be opposites in ways that kind of ease any sort of urgency of needing other people to be different from how they are. By seeing the kind of steps that people go in a passion, more grace, more like witness to yourself and to others. That's like the loose thesis I'm gonna try to keep coming back to. And my brain says I should have some like anecdote right now to like say, here's an example, and you can ground it in reality, but I don't have one ready, so we're just gonna go straight into theory. Unless somebody from you guys, do you guys have any right away, some example, anyone who knows what I'm talking about? A dialectical. No. Okay, so here's the basic structure of a dialectic. Essentially, you have a thesis. You have a particular way of being. So for example, as a kid, I was like, I'm just going to do what my parents tell me, right? Like that's my thesis. Follow parents. At some point in my development, I was like, wait a second, fuck you guys, I'm not going to do what you say. This is the antithesis. This is like, fuck you, I'm going to do what I want. Sorry, if people don't like language, let me know and I can tone it down. what this kind of, so this movement, I kind of like to draw like a spiral, because the whole thing of framing things this way is that you can see that eventually you often come around to a synthesis, which is essentially a joining or a synthesizing of both the thesis and the antithesis. So like for me, what I do now basically is I choose what to do, and it often looks exactly like following my parents said, right? So I'm kind of like self-determined, but in a way that looks like following the rules. What do we call that? What?
That's always adulting.
Adulting. There you go. So this is like a basic structure, and what's important about this is it's very easy to confuse this with this. So in circling, a really common thing that happens is that people are like, say like a lot of adulting, or also, hold on, stepping back for a second. This becomes a new thesis, and the process can go on indefinitely. So we can look at like grand movements, like we could look at like human history from, I don't know, like 10,000 BC as like a certain kind of thesis, the way we should interact and be with each other, and then, you know, society. And so we can look at these really grand movements, and we can also assume that this is happening in like little microcycles as we go. So like the little, like the line is actually like this, right? Thesis, antithesis, synthesis, thesis. And if you zoom into any one of these, you're going to see it's more like that, right? Does that make sense? Just like constantly occurring. And this is one of the reasons why I think this is a really useful frame. So I'm like, oh, it actually describes a lot of what's occurring.
Thought that I had, the order is kind of odd. I like it. I just thought of this as a pole, thesis on one end of the pole, antithesis on the other end of the pole, and then the string between it gets plucked, and that's the synthesis. The lived experience is the vibration of the string, finding the resonance and the harmony between the poles.
I love that. Yeah, another way you can look at this is like, it's a lot of times these seem like they're opposites, and like, oh, how do I do this or that or the other? But it's like actually obviously like one thing. So things that look like problems from a different vantage point, when you can zoom out and see the whole development, they're not a problem. Like if I'm looking to take a road and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I should go right or left. It's like, actually, I just need to take a road. They're both the same road, right and left are the same thing. And it's like no longer a problem, just because of the shift in the way I see it. And we practice this in circling all the time by like, and you'll notice tonight probably at some point, like someone will share something that you definitely want to be different. You'd be like someone will be like, I'm in pain, for example. And you'll be like, how can I help you get out of pain? But like the circling movement is to say, hold on, just because they're in pain doesn't mean there's anything wrong. I don't even know what that means. Like I don't know what pain is. I don't know what kind of pain. I don't know if they like it. I don't know if they don't. I'm just like putting my version of what matters and what doesn't onto them. So instead of seeing this as some problem I have to solve, let me like really interesting to explore. We just get curious, because the world's kind of a mirror in this point of view or this perspective. The more I practice doing that with others, like, oh, really? This is you're in pain. What's that like? What's upsetting you? What kind of pain? You know, just really following an inquiry. The more I can be that way with myself, I develop a kind of self-compassion by compassioning with others, and vice versa. In circling, I'm like, oh, I give myself so much more room to be all sorts of random crap in circling. Like I say weird stuff. I like walk around the room like a lion. I'm like just doing all sorts of things that like I kind of try out first in circling, and then am able to integrate more later. And then, like, once I love myself in it, I can start bringing more compassion or love to others. Yeah. So I want to look at a few examples. It's good? It's fun? Doing good? All right. And that's why I brought different colors today. Okay. So here's some really common examples. In the developmental sequence, you have a caterpillar, right? Which comes into a chrysalis, which eventually becomes a butterfly. And again, this is like, what's useful about this is seeing like when somebody's in like a mucked up, like cocooning phase, it doesn't necessarily mean that they like totally fuck something up. It could be that they're actually like on the next stage of their developmental journey. And it could actually be that there's some sort of like wonder to behold rather than like something that you have to do. And if you tried to like rip the caterpillar out of its chrysalis, you would like totally kill it. And it would never become the butterfly that it's like meant to become. That's another reason circling, like we often say there's like nowhere to get, but more present. We're not trying to develop. It's kind of ironic because I actually think it's like one of the most developmentally potent practices I've ever found. And it's because of this. It's because like usually when we're bringing this like urgency to grow and be different and like integrate shadows and like find all of our painful childhood experiences and heal them and reinterpret them, like that's often like trying to rush this process and like jump from here to here. And you can actually just enjoy life more and like be more in flow and like live well and stuff like by letting this natural cycle happen. That kind of letting happen is what we often call surrender. Surrendering to what's true, what's here. And the thing that I'm surrendering is like my need for things to be other than they are. And what I'm surrendering to is life or truth, the kind of love that's already present in the fact that things happen to be what they are. It's kind of the big yes that life is already giving to everything. In that sense, life's already kind of loving whatever's happening. We're like giving up our non-love, our resistance, our like wanting something else to this much larger sense of embracing everything. And the only key factor there is that like the larger embrace is very, as far as I can tell, it's very welcoming. Life is very welcoming of resistance, of wanting to be different, of all sorts of like dark, weird, crazy, negative emotions. So we have to like surrender to allow those as well, and like be in the tension. This is a kind of creative tension of like, I know I'm not supposed to want people to be different, but like here I am wanting that. Can I explore that? And that's a classic circling move. I really want you to smile instead of being sad. I know that I'm like, it's all about me, but I don't know what to do. Like, how's that for you? And then we enter into this kind of exchange. I don't have to try to be something else. Even I don't have to try to not be trying to be something else. Yeah? So here's another example. And I'm just going to write down a few of them. Let's go from I. This is like, in any given moment, this is what I am. I am a friendly person. I am nice. I am whatever, to a kind of it. Start to feel angry. So this anger becomes an it I can relate to. Right? It's no longer like I'm angry. Like, and this moves into like a mind. There's a kind of, like I am this like hot, angry feeling to like, oh yeah, I have this. Or like, this is a thing that I can notice and look at. So like, I have this and I can choose it or not choose it. Does that make sense?
Not clear to me what's going on with this spread. That all of them individually, all of them individually have made sense, but I don't see how they're like connected. I'd pile on and just add that the last one just didn't make sense. I hit my.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. So think of this as like, this is my subjectivity. This is what I refer to as who I am. My subjective experience. So like, what's one example for you? So yeah, I am confused. And it's just like who you are in this moment. You don't really have much space around it, right? So like through the process of kind of noticing it, now we're in dialogue, you might notice that like, okay, I might be like, well, what's that confusion like? How do you know you're confused?
I don't know how to tell, maybe just.
That you're looking means you're already kind of making this subjective experience of confusion into more of an object, right? Because now you're not just confused, you're also like examining, you're like this kind of awareness that's examining confusion, and you're confused. And you're like, how do I give this guy a response? Kind of a weird question. What does he mean? How do I know if I'm confused or not? So there's like now more space, more psychological happening. Yeah. So if we keep going down this road or we're like exploring your confusion, you might start to like define the object more clearly. You might start to say, oh yeah, like for me, I know one thing that happens in like, I say I'm confused when I'm like a little embarrassed. Because like for me, I think I should understand everything. It's not like a reasonable belief, but like it's in there somewhere. And so like if I don't understand something, I notice I'm like a little embarrassed, my cheeks flush. So like this is like my objective confusion gets a little bit more like rounded out. I get detail on it, which then allows me to kind of move back around to like a sense where I have this in a larger self. Like I can engage the confusion or not. I can say yes or no to it. And when I do say yes, it looks really similar to just being confused. But the difference is that like I have this self-identity, this spaciousness around it that came from this process.
So it's interesting. Just in that, I noticed for me, kind of witnessing that it moves kind of fast from I am confused. This confusion is me to I'm noticing something about how I know I'm confused and I'm confused. This shift there is so subtle that it's really easy to miss.
Yeah.
It's a very subtle shift from, wait a minute, I don't know what's going on, to how do I know I don't know what's going on? It feels just very subtly different, right? That those are two distinct things.
And it's huge, right?
Yeah,
like
right.
we've probably all been in arguments. Like think of the last argument you were in where you were like sure you were right or the other person was a total jackass. And like you're just kind of totally enmeshed with your belief. And like you're in this kind of I am right, I am whatever. And then like just that tiny little, like just a tiny bit of air. Like, how do I know that I'm right? Or how do I know for sure this is even if I am like mostly right, is this the only way to see things? Or like, who am I that thinks I'm right? What is this kind of arising in? Just like a tiny little bit of air that gives us a little space. And suddenly there's like room for shit to move. And a lot of times the energy of the argument moves. And like in that, you can like start to be like, okay, well, like I'm thinking the other day, I did something where the other guy was being an idiot in this argument I was in. And yet the way I responded was equally immature. And I kind of like yelled back at him. And that's not how I want to be. And it doesn't really matter what he did. It's not who I want to be. So like in that kind of noticing for a moment, I could without like letting go of like, I think he was immature also, I could be like, hey, actually, I'm sorry for the way I just acted towards you. That wasn't called for. And I'm a little embarrassed about it. And then there's enough room there usually that I can then say, I'm still a little upset about this, or like, I still want to do things differently. And they're often more open. So that space gives room for the relationship.
Sounds like what you're saying is like, imagine the thesis would be like, you're confusing me. And then the antithesis would be like me observing how I'm feeling and like kind of like almost in a stoic manner. And then the synthesis might be like, I have an intuitive feeling and I'm going to trust it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Or maybe even the synthesis is, maybe we don't understand. Maybe there's something in us that is thinking about this in some way that's not quite right? How can I loosen this and see what's here rather than what we're certain about?
Yeah, there's a sense of like one, the other, both. Although I would say another little thing would be like this a kind of claim of like everything should be mutual. So let's go with mutuality. I think there's like a movement from mutuality to what I would say is like holarchy. So this is like, if I get vulnerable and share myself, then you should get vulnerable and share yourself, right? We should have like a mutual exchange. Or what's another kind of reciprocal thing? Like obviously people do this in sales all the time. They give you a little gift and then they like expect that you're going to want to reciprocate and give it back. There's a lot of reciprocity. You'll see that like in a lot of people think that they're like, oh, I owned my experience, now you should be owning yours. Right? I don't think that's the way the world works. I think you own your experience because like it's just better for you. You get the reciprocity from the universe because like your life is better for it. But in any case, there's a movement I think where it's like, oh yeah, like I don't need to like always be like this reciprocal because there's a kind of assumption of equality, which probably isn't true. And like holarchy means there's a some things are better than others, but there's a kind of inclusion of the things that moved. So a really classic example would be like molecules are more complex than atoms because they contain more atoms than one atom, and yet they contain an atom in its wholeness. The kind of whole that's a part of a larger whole. So you might like, you have like, you know, the USA, you have like Texas and like California, and there's Rhode Island. That's a holarchy. There's whole entities that are themselves part of a larger whole. So there's a movement, I think, from mutuality to holarchy. And then eventually, I think it would come back around to something that's kind of like, I don't know, probably some sort of like construct awareness. I wasn't expecting there to be a bunch of new people when I was talking about this one. So we're just going to put that on the board, brush it off for now.
Eric, how are you doing with the dialectic?
I'm still confused. Clearly how to pass it on.
Think of this like as this is you're not supposed to draw big buckets around these necessarily, because I could switch this so that this is antithesis 2. This is like synthesis, and this is the first antithesis. Does that make sense? I mean, I just made it way too complex.
Can you say a little more?
So like, I'm not necessarily saying that that like adulting belongs to fuck y'all, which is a thesis, and there's another synthesis up here. Does that make sense?
That sounds like it's like a cycle of like, oh wait, the opposite is actually true.
Exactly.
Like, oh, I'm caretaking, fuck caretaking, like you gotta be independent, and then it's like, oh, compassion. Oh, but like compassion, but I need to hold up strong boundaries, and then like keeps.
Exactly. Did that example make sense?
That's a good, really good.
It's a really good example. I'm going to repeat that because it's really good.
Share.
So you had caretaking is like this one movement, and then you're like, oh wait, fuck, I need to be more independent. And then you're like, oh wait, when I was really independent, I forgot that there's like a kind of compassion that still like maintains my like identity or something. Independent compassion, and then you're like, oh shit, but that I still forgot. Like there's like I forgot about boundaries, and I like destroyed boundaries. That was dumb, and it just keeps going. It just keeps going.
If anybody knows anything about French history, they just did this for the last years, just like one extreme to the other, to the other, to the other. Tried to. Synthesis wasn't as easy.
Right. If you don't see that this is happening, well, a lot of times what happens is you just go back and forth, or like if there's like I think right now in just my own personal opinion, say someone like Jordan Peterson, this like intellectual person, is trying to pull us into a synthesis, a higher version like of integration beyond postmodernity, like in the academic sphere. And I think a lot of people are thinking that it's this. I think a lot of his followers think it's this. So it's like, yeah, we need to go back to this, libertarian, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, he's kind of like, no, actually, I have a lot of like social democratic values. Like, I'm just really upset about this thing and like this, so it's, if we're not aware of this kind of cycle, it's really easy to confuse the two and end up like kind of going from chrysalis back to caterpillar. It's a real shame. And the important thing about seeing this like encircling is like, and this is part of why we kind of enter into a realm of deeper humility. Like, I don't actually know what's best for someone else. They probably don't necessarily know either. So that's part of why we're like surrendering to like the truth of what's here and presence and the unfolding. Because like it's so easy to look at somebody in one of these and assume that the opposite is what's needed. But it may not be, and maybe they're moving towards this and they haven't even gotten like 30% of the way. So it's like you need to actually push them further into that. Someone could come to the Circling Lab and like they've lived their whole life in like a total kind of following the rules, codependent, or maybe it's just really healthy version of like whatever. Like I was raised as a Sikh, and Sikhism is the best, and it's the only way to be a good Sikh. You have to like get rid of your self-identity essentially. And so then encircling, like they start like realizing they can just say what they want. And it's like, holy shit, I can actually tell people like what I feel, and I can say, I need this, and I can say, fuck you, and I can get angry. And like, it would be really easy to be like, hey, by the way, like you should stop doing that and like find the next level of like compassion, but it'll end up sending them back to what they're differentiating away from. So maybe that's like, no, fuck it, like keep going, man. Like keep claiming your independence, because you got a long way to go before you like turn around and head back the other direction.
Kind of like the hero's journey too, huh?
Definitely. Yeah.
Awesome.
We could turn it on its side and it would become like a circle.
Like the descent and the, yeah.
What were you going to say?
Well, it's just, I guess I'm thinking that the synthesis is kind of, there's an element where it transcends the opposites, right? So it bumps it up to a different, you're out of that.
Exactly.
You're not bumping around up here, you're actually kind of up a level or something. I don't know how to talk about this, but
Yeah.
so then if that becomes a new thesis, it's a new thesis on a different layer of understanding or broader understanding or more subtle or nuanced or something. Is that?
Absolutely. It's like a new octave.
Okay.
This will similarly be like a higher octave, like a subtler version.
I guess I was thinking of the exact one thing I have in my head of like, I start out in a victim.
Nice.
And the antithesis of that is what I would call an empowered victim, which is like a victim with a stick. Which feels like it's very much the same thing as a victim. It feels it's not outside of it.
Right.
But then actual empowerment to me, it's sort of like, it's like, I don't know, like absolute empowerment. Like it's not conditioned on how someone relates to me or not.
Right.
It's like I'm not empowered because I get a certain outcome. I'm just empowered, period. So then from there I can have maybe actual forgiveness or actual, like spaciousness with whatever's going on, whereas before that I was totally bound. So in that case, the thesis and the antithesis seem like they're basically kind of on the same level. Like here you have it up one. And I'm always think, I'd like to think that there's a way to skip the middle one, but I mean, I guess that's what we're all talking about here is it kind of the idea that you can't skip?
That's a really good question. I don't really know the answer to.
Or maybe in that case, the idea would be if you started a thesis and maybe the antithesis was like really quick and you just move through it, maybe that could look like you're skipping, but you're actually not.
I've heard of a concept called, like, the way I heard of it was called tokens, where it's like you can kind of, based on societal norms of the people that you're around, you can kind of like get to a level that you didn't kind of self-earn. But then at some point, in order to like kind of take it out for the rest of your life, you're gonna have to go back and like kind of get the tokens, like get the actual skills you need to kind of be there.
Yeah.
It's something like without the antithesis, it's real easy to fall back into thesis. It's like they're almost, it's weird. It's like I'm thinking mountain climbing or something. There's you got some place you need to put a piton in there in order to. It's not wrong. Actually, I like the idea of the two ends of the string better. Like trying to pluck a string that only is attached on one end. It's like it doesn't work. You can't do that. You have to get a root place and then anchor someplace out. And I like what you're saying about it. It's kind of like in a different dimension. It's like, it's not about placing another anchor. It's about, okay, what do I do now that I've got this tension, this two things kind of opposing one another? What's the vibration that happens between that opposition? That's synthesis of that kind. And it has a whole range of expression, right? It's not simply just another thing. It looks very different. It brings out qualities in both the thesis and antithesis that I didn't see before, right? Like the very first one of, I'm going to just do what my parents say. No, I'm going to do my own thing. And then you find, as I'm doing this, wow, what I want to do includes a lot of what my parents wanted me to do. I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's something, and what was your name again? Michael. Yeah, there's something about giving a kind of big yes or welcoming or like loving to just the experience that's happening. It seems to make this movement easier. Like it may still be painful, but like it's going to be pain without resistance instead of pain with resistance. And I think one thing that happens is like the tension of the opposite stops feeling like a bad thing. Like doing what your parents told you is not bad. It's actually like really smart. And there's a lot of wisdom. And like saying I'm going to do my own thing is also not bad and like smart and important. And I think that's one of the things that happens in the synthesis is that like when you can like look back at the developmental sequence and be like, actually those are both good and necessary and right. And I'm probably going to like go back to them. Like when I start having kids, I'm going to go back to doing what my parents say for a little while. And like, I'm going to keep encountering things where I go, I'm like, oh yeah, I should listen to them instead of doing what I think.
Yeah, I think your question really brought something to clarity for me about, you asked like whether you have to go through an antithesis. And I was thinking about how I was thinking about synthesis as like a form of like theory. And like for me, synthesis is like some theory that can include both of them. And like something I encounter a lot is like if you just have one thing and you try to generalize, there's like lots of directions. And maybe think about like how your example, right? You have victim or an empowered victim. But those are antithetical, but there's actually other antitheses for a victimhood, right? You could go from victim to perpetrator too. And like that's an antithesis that's different and might require a different synthesis, right? So like even though they're framed as opposites, it seems to me like there may be many antitheses for like one thesis and many syntheses of those.
Absolutely.
So like whether you have to go through it is like seems relative for them.
It's like a three-dimensional, like add another dimension, you have like, yeah, like you said, there's victim and like perpetrator, which is similar to the victim with the stick, but like a little different, And yeah, you could also have like the opposite of victim is some other, I don't know, Savior, yeah, to bring the whole drama triangle in. So that's another thing that has to like, yeah, I love that. And I love it too, because like I don't, these distinctions should be helpful for like allowing ideally like more space for being. Like there's this incredible creativity in life, and like life just keeps seemingly to generate like more and more novelty and like freshness, and like seems like a lot of times these tensions, these things that we try to avoid, like end up generating like some like cool creative new solution, which may be like the prefrontal cortex. I don't mean like solution like to a math problem necessarily. There may be like the formation of like stars in the early universe. Like it's, I think it's fucking amazing what the universe does. And so ideally, like this isn't necessarily like this is like the God's honest truth, and you like have to look for like this sequence everywhere, but more like it might open a kind of freedom to like play and experiment and like love other people a little bit more, and like get curious. Like, what is that doing? If I'm kind of pushing that away, is there something that I'm missing? Is there a potential there that I could like feel into more? I could synthesize more? Is there something, yeah, that will actually like give me more of a taste of reality, more joy?
Is there a way of knowing if something that feels strong for me is either a thesis or antithesis?
Is it kind of like actually all things, because the spiral just keeps moving?
Yeah.
Does it inherently keep moving? Like, could something be a synthesis and not inherently become a new thesis?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, like I was asking, like, you know, is there like if we took the whole dialectic and made it a thesis, is there like an antithesis?
Oh my god! Holy shit!
And then like, does that keep going? Like, probably not. Or probably it's not. Probably, but like, how useful is it? It's a really good question. I think, as a whole, shooting for like an end or like an achieved state, a perfect state, is probably going to produce less joy and less development, ironically. I think in general, having a sense of like, it's okay to be a little imperfect, to be unfinished, and probably the journey will keep going forever. It's going to end up creating a more surrendered experience of life. It seems to be more aligned with like what the universe does. Like, be easy to be on Earth like 3 billion years ago and be like, well, this is pretty amazing what's already been created. Like, I guess this is the end, and then midst of like trees, and then like animals, and then humans. You know, like I have no idea what's coming. So it's, yeah, I tend to lean more on the edge of like, probably it just keeps going. But that's also probably an antithesis to like the completion ideology. So I'll probably come back around. Be like, yeah, something's complete.
I'm still wondering about this overall movement. Trying to like wrap my head around it. I feel like I don't have
Watching your development, I've seen this a lot, and that's what like really impresses me. Over the last year, I've seen you. The very beginning of my interactions with you, you were super quiet, not saying anything, really shy. And then I saw you go to the antithesis or something that looks kind of like that, where you were like purposely being disagreeable, or it seemed to me playing edges. I don't know if this is true or not, but like I just remember disagreeing with everything, and then now I see like it seems like there's these two parts that you can like be either. I don't know if that resonates with you, but like that's how I've seen your growth. Yeah.
I wonder if what you're asking is like kind of what is like This is like a way of looking at developmental theory.
I want to ask if you have a definition for dialectic, deep thinking conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think dia means two, and lectic means turning. So like two turnings. Just keeps the turning between two things. The same way dialogue means two speakers or something, I think. Yeah, word. So I think I think this is really awesome in circling, because circling is a dialogue. And there often is, like in a micro moment, again, you'll notice this, we can do a little exercise, but it's very likely going to happen over and over again tonight, where you'll see two seeming opposites, and where we emerge is where they're actually both partially true and partially missing a piece of the truth. But in the dialogue, there is this kind of movement to something higher. And in that sense, I think circling, even though we're like, man, it's amazing and it's like the freshest new thing, we have all these cool awarenesses. In another sense, it's like, it is the most classic, like basic form of being human together. Like we come with these kind of unique ways of being subjective, self-aware entities. And we like bring them together in some sort of turning, some conversation or dialogue. And then we become bigger because of it. There's some sort of interchange that happens, and we leave with more than we came with.
You mentioned dialogue. I don't know if you're familiar around here with David Bohm and his stuff. I took a class on intergroup dialogue like 10 years ago in Portland. And I was really fascinated with that, because there were like 14 of us for 2 hours a week for 10 weeks, all different types of people, different politics, different everything. And within a few weeks, we started getting really close. And it spilled out for me into how I was interacting with myself.
Yeah.
But the main distinction that I kind of took from that was what Bohm called suspension. And I'm imagining that he would put that kind of here.
Yeah. Oh, here.
Yeah, like there'd be like a qualitative, like if I have a thesis and antithesis. And maybe with your example, well, I follow my parents or fuck them, and those are maybe interchangeable. Like I might start here, I might start here. Either way, I'm still stuck.
Yeah.
But then, or the one that Bohm talks about, I think he talks about the idea of I either must express this,
Yeah.
or I have to stuff it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's either going to explode out of me and I'm going to yell at you, or I'm going to just stuff it and I'm stuck in one or the other. And then suspending it is like stepping outside of the perception necessity within which those two things exist.
Yeah.
Which allows for some broader movement upward, so to speak. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, does that make sense? That fits? Yeah. Yeah, I think I actually am only roughly familiar with Bohm. I think David might be more. You guys should check it out. Sense from the aligned with what we're doing in circling.
It sort of sounds like it.
Yeah. So I think it's wonderful to bring it in.
One thing, I just want to say that one of the things I think that might be a little bit confusing is I think, as much as I love the caterpillar, chrysalis, butterfly metaphor, I think it's a pseudo dialectic. I don't think chrysalis is a true antithesis somehow, in a way that makes it difficult to fit that in the pattern of this thing. So in me, it's like this is the one that kind of clanks, and I'm not sure how to fit it in.
Pseudo why?
Because it kind of looks sort of like the other ones, but it doesn't. Like it doesn't seem to me like chrysalis is a real antithesis to caterpillar. It seems like it's kind of, but it's not. I'm gonna do my. I mean, it's not. It's an
I
intermediate.
feel like an antithesis of David right now.
Let's leave it. I'm going to throw out a few more examples I think would be useful. So,
Can I get one more example for you?
yeah,
One of the beautiful examples is when you started off the philosophy in Austin, it was theory, all theory. And then at some point you said, we're going to do circling. It's practice,
yeah,
all practice.
exactly. Yeah,
And now the synthesis is theory and practice. We're going to do both of those combined. And it's a beautiful transition.
yeah, that's great. All practice, and then synthesis is studio.
Yes.
Do you have any like examples that are like group oriented?
Let's do that in a second. I just want to give a few like another psychological examples that I think could be really helpful to just keep the orientation. One would be like something's happening in you, and so first you kind of acknowledge it. Then you kind of saying this is like a third person perspective, like it is an it. You kind of talk to, this is second person perspective, talk to a thing. Like I acknowledge that I don't know, feeling sexual attraction about a coworker or something. And then I had this notion of like, cool, like, let me see if I can bring this into dialogue, either with a friend or like with a journal or something like that. And then you can start to own it. Like, oh yeah, this is, and just like anything that you own, that doesn't mean you have to get it out and play with it, but you choose it. So it moves from like the third person to the second person to the first person. Another example would be, yeah, I like the example of keeping, oh shit, I was gonna say, there's a different kind of keep it in, like don't express what's happening. There's a kind of project it out, becomes someone else's fault. And there's a kind of use it to like work it out. We do that a lot in circling. Instead of just keeping in whatever you're feeling, or assuming that it's actually not yours and it's about someone else, let's bring it into the relationship and see what the truth is. And let's see. I think these notes don't make any sense. I'm sorry. Yeah, they're mine. But I was thinking there's of examples in circling. There's kind of like, hey, this is yours and it's your fault. There's like it's mine and it's like I'm just responsible for everything. And then there's like, actually it's mostly yours, but like I can take responsibility for how I'm participating with it. Right? And then there's probably another turning. Yeah, we all recognize these, right?
I've got a group example for you, Shane.
Let's do it.
So one would be like, I'm the boss, so do what I say. And then there would be like, all right, we're all gonna vote, we're gonna come to complete consensus, and we're all gonna do things that we all agree upon. And then there would be like, okay, like, you're in charge of these things, and so you decide that you're out of
Yeah, I like that. I think what's coming up for me is like somehow like the application of this, like if we're talking and like we're disagreeing on something, like I'm bringing my practices, you're bringing your practices to like circling where Jordan isn't saying exactly what's correct. But like, I think you're a thesis that hasn't made it to synthesis, and you think I'm a thesis that hasn't made it to synthesis, like, and we're like clashing, like wondering if the we somehow goes through the synthesis. If that makes sense. Like, one of us is definitely correct, and the other was wrong. I don't know the other place would be.
Yeah, we might actually, as a whole, like, the normal thesis of conversation is like, let's find out who's right or wrong. And then like the circling antithesis is like, forget that, let's just look at impact. So instead of finding out whether like we have the right opinion or not, like, how does it feel to be with me? And what do I notice hearing that you feel that? And like that clears up so much disagreement and like makes for awesome like intimacy. And there's probably a synthesis where it's like, yeah, let's focus on impact, and eventually someone's probably righter than someone else, and let's figure out who is. So that, I think we've done some of those like encircling Austin as a culture over the past 5 years as well. Like, I think we did a lot of like express, like fucking like get it out, and then we're like, oh God, like let's just really love each other and like have like really understand and do more being with, and then hopefully we're in some sort of synthesis now where we do that.
There's still a meta perspective though, but not necessarily wrong. It'd be easy to say thesis is wrong somehow.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's both, because it's like if we said none of them is really wrong, and we meant like none is like better than the other or higher or like more developed or more integrated, then we're kind of like undercutting the point that like the integration actually includes more.
The tension goes down.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Yeah. And I think what happens when we do that is we like that like none of them are wrong. I think what I want to bring with that perspective when I bring it is like a sense of like acceptance, a sense of love, a sense of being with. There's actually a lot of values that I'm bringing into the room. And if I go too far in an extreme direction of like, yeah, none of the perspectives are wrong, I actually lose the ability to claim values. Can't say that this value of loving and welcoming is more important and more valuable than anyone else's value. And I don't really want to do that. I want to be able to stand for, yeah, like it's fucking important to see how we can actually be with a variety of points of view and like sit in tension and let it evolve us and move us in the direction of a common good, something that's like better for everyone. And ideally like better for the long-term like well-being of life itself or consciousness.
Even the subjective ideas, you can't. It's hard to say none of them are wrong, because if you start down that path, you get into moral relativism, and then you start accepting things like eating babies, at the extreme end.
Right.
So I mean, even in the subjective parts, there should be things that are acceptable and things that aren't. But that should be a large set of acceptable.
And you could probably say like, it's like right wrong mentality. None are wrong.
Yeah.
And then in some version of like, none are wrong, but some are better than others.
Well, no, if none is wrong, then none is wrong.
Right, but the point is that we can actually say yes to this. We can say absolutely none are wrong. It's not wrong for a 7-year-old to be acting like a 7-year-old. They should be acting like a 7-year-old. But
depending on the action, it can agree that punch you in the nose or worse, right here.
Absolutely, but if you're a kid, if your 2-year-old punched me in the nose,
Well, yeah.
So we can say that like punching people in the nose on the whole, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But there is a better and worse like expression or time or place or context. I think we can say, sure, none are wrong, that's fine. But there's things that are better or more right.
Well, okay, let's change it from punching the nose to shoot you in the heart. Is that wrong? Is there any ambiguity there? If you haven't committed it, if you haven't
Well,
actually committed.
I mean, we have to start getting into these like philosophical, okay, let's define this, who's that, are we at war, are we blah, blah, blah.
I think there's a real important distinction about what seems like it's implied by that, which is if it's not wrong, that means there's no consequences, or there's no impact, it's like, oh, and so it's okay for me to do that, right? Nothing's gonna happen to me if I do that because it's fine. It's like, oh, it's like, it's by physics, it's an allowable action, right, from that perspective. But by a moral thing, we're gonna do something about that.
Yeah.
So in that sense, but in the same way, even in this discussion, nothing wrong happened, I did something about that. So
There's
it's
nothing wrong.
It's Ed, right?
There's still things in my mind, there's still actions in my mind that can't be anything but wrong.
Or are we in it right now?
Yeah, totally.
What's that?
Yeah.
Okay,
We're in a kind of dialectical tension now, right?
that helps
It's like-
me chill out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's, look throughout the history, the history of human civilization, and hopefully there's some things that we can agree on that are wrong, or wrong.
Just like the synthesis to me would be like some kind of difference between like rules and emotions. Like it seems like the thesis is like these are the rules. It's definitely like the theory is not allowed to do this, Jordan. But then it's like the antithesis is like you Jane. And then like a synthesis is like if you punch Jordan in the nose, he's gonna be angry. It's not that you did something wrong. It's like we're all angry at you for punching him in the nose.
But I don't think there was a period of time, I don't think somebody took me aside and said, don't kill people.
Well, and how about this? Let's play for a second. Like, what was your name again? Carrie.
Yeah.
I know I kind of put you in the camp of none of them are wrong. Like, you didn't necessarily like stand for that position, but would you play with it? Like, you'd be like the none of them are wrong, none of the points of view are wrong perspective. And so like now we have like two positions. And I think what just one of the things this does is it grounds the discussion into people. Like, and let's see if you can talk directly to Carrie about what matters to you. Not so much the theory, but like what's at stake here? Like, why is this? Are you passionate about it?
I'm passionate about it because of releasing the worst in people. If we say nothing's wrong, do whatever you want, it's all okay. There's darkness in people that will be let out.
How can there actually be darkness if someone's born a baby, right? And they make choices like nature versus nurture throughout their life. Maybe there are consequences to their actions, like they go to jail, so they don't kill other people. But is it actually wrong, particularly if they had a mental illness or they were severely abused and they killed someone, and that was their way of getting an event that's very unhealthy and not okay for other people. But inherently, is that wrong if that's actually their true need to get their need met, be significant in the world? Something that they're getting that need, right?
That's an awfully major need.
Okay, pause for a second. Thank you guys. Like I'm loving that you're willing to go into it. Does anyone have a sense of like? I got a sense of a place that you guys already agree. That's one way to look for a synthesis. Like, what's something that you're already sharing? A passion for.
Intellectual discourse.
For sure. Yeah, and there's something else I think that I'm seeing.
Like acting on people,
So I said, this,
not acting on people.
maybe.
Are you concerned about justice?
Yeah.
They care about humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what it seems so basically is just getting the needs met. You're both speaking from needs met.
And I hear your need to not be killed or hurt in some way, or your friends, you know.
Well,
you want
yeah, I mean, that would be better. It hasn't happened, but, you know, I think the alternative is.
Yeah, and there's also like a need, you're like, I want to have a society where like our darkest impulses are kept in check. Did I hear that from you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're right, we're born in innocence, but, evil acts come from somewhere.
And also the assumption that like the thing that keeps people in check is the decision or belief that certain things are wrong. That like making things wrong makes them not happen.
So just want to notice that in this case, we found a kind of common ground, not necessarily so that you guys wouldn't disagree, but like to elevate the conversation in a way. Like now it feels different to me. I don't know if it feels different to you. And I heard like one thing that was different is you right away said, you're right, like babies are born in innocence. Instead of like coming from like, no, it's like a yes first. And then that's what I think where we start to see movement in the dialectic. It's like, yes, that's true, but there's something else you're not including necessarily.
I feel kind of in the world your side. I'm like wondering why we're trying to say that some things aren't objectively wrong. All in all cases.
So, to clarify, wrong is something that is like universal amongst us, that this like one like we all have the same right and wrong, right? Like it's like something that, who decides the right and the wrong? Is it a higher power that decides right and wrong and we do the best to keep up? Is it something that's in us that's just all of the same, agreed upon right and wrong? Or is it a personal like, I decide my right and wrong, you decide right and wrong?
That gets back to that everything's okay.
Right, so if that is not what you're talking about, what you're talking about is something that's the same for everybody and universal for everybody, correct?
So we got to keep practicing like in the circling spirit. If we're looking for a synthesis of like a kind of intellectual discourse and an interpersonal meditation, like we can stay on the discourse and then notice like what's happening in you.
What's happening in me is I'm getting really like frustrated with the head part, not because I can't keep up, but I don't want to go there.
Okay. I'm almost with you. I think that was a very good head critique of what's happening.
I noticed the desire to know what I think about it, and I'm trying to do that from a head space, but there's no concrete definitions for me to process. So then I'm trying to do it from a gut space, and I don't want to know what other people are feeling, so I can't connect that way either.
Great.
So I feel frustrated.
So you're frustrated. How is it interpersonally? What do you notice?
Personally, I don't know what other people are experiencing in relation to me, and I just kind of feel like I feel cut off from there. So I don't know.
Perfect. So the circling mindset is like nothing wrong with that. This is where our nothing wrong comes in. And let's get curious. Like now that you've noticed you feel cut off, you don't know where other people are. We're in a new moment. Like what's it like for you? Are you still frustrated? Does something change?
I feel curious what the impact of me doing that was.
More relief. Yeah, I felt like a slow space open up. And I want to encourage you to like follow that curiosity.
So I'm still having the head thoughts of, was I allowed to do that? Is that what this, I came late, is that what this?
Is that right or wrong?
Was that right?
Felt good to me.
Was that violating any agreed upon like intentions for this space.
Before you came in, like, we actually set the rules.
We decided about everything in the world and what's
Yeah.
right and what's not.
And you Chris is definitely not allowed to.
It was
That makes
just,
it feel so less powerful when you say that. Well, if this one room decided I'm not allowed to be here, that's not, I'm like, you're not all the people in the world. So it
that's
just
still making
feels-
your point. All right.
Oh,
No, it's fine. It's just we're gonna take a break in between sessions. It's about 9 minutes past when I said I would stop for this.
Something I wanted to note with what training mentioned earlier, is synthesis something, right? And for me, I think synthesis is actually the vibration between a thesis and me.
Like you're saying the string.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. It actually is something trying to resolve what the endpoints are, which is kind of what you're doing too. Trying to resolve the endpoints of, wait a minute, what's my head think? What's my gut think? I can't quite tell. And there's a vibration.
I just had something real quick too, I thought it was interesting, and I realized, oh, there's some tension going on over there. And for me, it was just fun, and I was taking the role, but I'm not invested in that opinion. But I noticed suddenly the room is getting amped, like, no, I have an opinion. It's like, oh, wait, isn't this just an example? So I noticed I felt like some caretaking.
Right. Well, this is the thing that's really cool, is seeing this way and just jumping on your string metaphor. It's like, I mean, yeah, I kind of gave you the role. So that we had this like string here, and we plucked it, and then like the reverberation like hit another string. And so now we have like a string tied to your string. And there's like all these kind of strings coming through the room. And I think one of the things we do in this kind of big group circling is we actually like allow for way more complexity to be kind of held and noticed and aware of than any one individual can actually manage on their own. And there's something that's really powerful about being in that and like being in those kind of vibrations. Like our instrument gets tuned, and like I think we actually grow in our capacity to be with that tension and to know ourselves and to be with different points of view that don't necessarily agree with ours, and to skillfully manage it by being like in that sea of interconnectivity or interconnection. There's my take-home point. Yeah. Any other questions? Before we close this one.
A mind vector, but it's a good one. The thoughts that don't confuse the map with the territory. It's really interesting. In this one, you can look at the territory as, oh yeah, there's this thing, and the map is what's right and wrong. And we tend to want to say, wait a minute, if we're saying that, then what does that mean about the world? It's like, don't confuse them, right? Then I notice whenever I say that, it's like, oh, I want the real map, I want the real territory. And the antithesis for me is that if there are no maps, there is no territory. And that, like, my brain goes, what? But there's something in that, right? The maps are the turtles all the way down. There's something in that maps are okay. They're just not absolute. And don't confuse them for absolute. And that's all we got. There's something beautiful in that that allows me to explore and feel wobbly and feel grounded as well. Like, no map is wrong. I'm glad I can hold on to that. And it's also not right. I can't rely on it. I can't eat that. Yeah.
All right. Any others?
What about paradoxes?
Oh,
I mean, because that seems like, because that's my answer to this riddle, is that it's like a, you'd say it's thesis antithesis, but it's like, it does not, it's static in a way. It doesn't, there's no way to transcend the paradox, it just stays there.
My initial hit, and I feel in this moment with you, I'm like, if you say that the paradox is like the end, you're avoiding letting the tension work you into a sentence. Like, don't avoid the paradox, don't give it a label so you don't have to feel it anymore. Stay in until you actually reach the higher vantage point where the paradox makes sense. And that may take a lifetime. Like if we look at the paradox of like, there's like stuff in the world like seems to be a real thing, and then you like can actually notice that you're noticing it, and the noticer is not the stuff.
So maybe there's a difference between the theoretical paradox and the lived one.
Yeah.
The body lived one is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You're defending against that with your head.
Yeah. Awesome. We'll take like 5 or 10 minutes until we start the next session. We're going to practice. Thank you guys.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thanks, Christina.
Bye, Christina.
Oh, I loved reading your comments. You were right on.
So good. I loved it. It's a transcendent inclusion, right? Something like that.